Okay, so to get started in Photoshop, we want to start by paying attention to where some of our tools are. At the top, you'll see your File toolbar. On the left, you'll see your main toolbox. On the right, you'll see some different windows that are open depending on what workspace you're in. So first, let's change our workspace. Right now, it might be on Essentials. We're going to change ours to Photography. If you don't see this menu here, you'll also find it under Window, Workspace. Again, we want to be on Photography right now. Now we want to take a look at the toolbox on the left. These are our most common Photoshop tools. You'll also see this double arrow that you can click to change the shape of your toolbox. Let's go ahead and open a picture. I'm going to click File, Open, and I want to browse through my folders to find the picture that I want. Here I'm going to start with this one, a dramatically lit portrait. First, let's zoom out a little bit. You'll see there is a zoom tool in your toolbox that you can zoom in, or you can hold down Alt and zoom out. Otherwise, you could also hold Alt on your keyboard and just use your scroll wheel. I find this to be a lot easier. Now, we want to make an adjustment so we can see this picture in rule of thirds. So let's make another adjustment. Under Edit, Preferences, Guides, Grid, and Slices. You'll find this menu, and we want to change this so that we can see a rule of thirds grid anytime we want. So these are the settings it should be. If you see something different, just change it. Right here, type 33.3. Make sure this is set to %, and subdivisions at 1. Go ahead and click OK. Now I can use a keyboard shortcut to bring up the grid. If I hold Control and apostrophe at the same time, you'll see this grid pop up. If I look at my photo, I can see that I have some items that are almost lined up with these. I have this Christmas tree in the background and the center line of the face. I think if it were shifted a little bit, it would be better. So the next thing I want to do, I'll go ahead and hide that, is to crop the image. This is my first major edit on any photo project I work on. Cropping basically just means cutting the picture so it's smaller. On the left, you'll see your crop tool. Go ahead and click that. You'll see this pop up right away. At the top, notice this option. Make sure you have a grid for rule of thirds. If it doesn't show up, just click right on here and you'll see that. The next thing that's really important is the shape of the picture. I could select ratio and type in any shape that I want. I could make this a very wide shape by making it a ratio of 10 units wide to 5 units high. If I want a square, I would just need the numbers to be the same. That's a 1-to-1 ratio. What matters here is what shape you want this picture to be. If you were to print, you might want to select one of these preset ratios. If you're using this as an art reference, you should use ratio and type in the dimensions of your paper or your canvas. Here for this, I'm going to just select 5x7, a pretty common shape. Now, when I do this, I can select a vertical or hit the arrows and get a horizontal. All I'm going to do here is just shift this a little bit, one way or the other, until I get a little closer to my rule of thirds. Here now the center line of the face is pretty close to this line, and the Christmas tree in the back is on this one. The other thing I have to keep in mind is I can't make this box bigger than my picture, or I've got this extra space. If you make it too much smaller, you're cutting away too many pixels, and you just won't have a very good quality image. So keep your crop nice and simple. So once you're happy with the crop adjustments you've made, click the check mark to accept the crop at the top. You'll see the changes take effect. Again, you can zoom in and out by holding Alt and your scroll wheel. Next step, let's take a look at some adjustments. Here on the right, make sure you have the Adjustments box selected, and below, make sure you have the Layers tab selected. Right now you can see I have our original image as a background layer. I'm going to add a new layer to do my first adjustment. If your photo is already black and white, you can skip this step, but if it's color, go ahead and click this one near the middle. It's called black and white. When I select that, the image changes immediately to see what's happening, but I can also adjust individual color bands and how they are interpreted as a black and white image. So feel free to play with this if you'd like. I'm going to keep this close to the default for now. When you're happy with it, you can hit the double arrows to hide this. Now notice in the Layers toolbox, you can see the background image and this new adjustment layer on top. If I want to hide the effect temporarily, I can check mark the eye. If I want to go back and change it some more, if I click on the black and white icon, it's going to bring up a whole another layer. I don't actually want to do that. I want to work on this previous one. So to get rid of it, I can just select the layer I want to get rid of, and way down on the bottom is a little trash can icon. Let's go ahead and delete that. Make sure you're deleting the whole layer effect. Okay, if I want to mess with my settings, I can just double click on this icon again. That'll bring up the adjustments. So let's move into the next adjustment. For me, it's typically levels. Levels is going to allow you to individually control your shadows, your midtones, and your highlights. Notice you have this graph here. Again, this is your histogram. It's showing how much of each color or value I have present in my picture. In this case, this represents the shadows. I have a lot of dark areas in my picture. I have a small amount of midtones and hardly any of these bright white highlight areas. One of the first things I do if I have a nice mountain-shaped histogram is just bring the ends in a little bit to tighten up the image. Feel free to move this midtone selector where you'd like to bring out the details. Notice if you go too extreme, the quality of the image declines significantly. So play around with this until you're happy with the results of the image, but where you're not sacrificing any image quality. Go ahead and close this. Another adjustment is your basic brightness and contrast. Go ahead and click on that. This is something you've probably seen lots of times before. This just handles things a little bit differently than levels, so feel free to play with this to complement your level settings. Again, you can increase, decrease, but if you go too far, you're going to really overly damage the picture. Contrast represents the difference between light and dark values. My photo already has pretty strong contrast because of the lighting used when I took it. So you won't see huge changes there like you would on maybe another photo. Alright, I'm going to go with that. Hide this. So now I can individually hide all of the changes that I've made and see what differences each adjustment made. I can put them all together by selecting them. The other thing you can do is actually make an individual adjustment partially transparent. So let's say I don't want this effect to take on 100%. I want this effect to only take 50%. So I'm going to take this opacity slider down, and you'll see a much more fine-tuned control over how much this effect is affecting the picture. So feel free to adjust these as you'd like. At this point, I am pretty happy with the quality of this photo. This is a black and white, dramatically lit portrait, and this is accomplishing the goals that I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and save. When I save in Photoshop, I'm going to click File, Save As, and there's two main file types we're going to typically use. The first is a Photoshop PSD file. This is the file type that I want if I'm going to be editing this photo again, if I'm not done working. This will keep all of my layers present. The other file type that we'll use for class is a JPEG. This is the most common image file type. This is what your picture probably already was when it started. So I'm going to select JPEG in this case because I'm done. I've already got my previous file name and I don't want to save over it. I'm going to click in here and just add .edit so that you can see it's the original picture but an edited version. Go ahead and browse to the folder where you want to save this. You can click the up arrow or you can click one of these options. Here I'm going to place this in a new folder. If you need a new folder, you can simply right click in this empty space, select a new folder, and I'm going to call this Edited Photos. Choose any name that makes sense for you. Now I'm going to click inside of the folder. Here you can see I've changed my file name. I have the JPEG file type that I want, and it's in the right location. Go ahead and click Save. At this point you'll have a quality selector. Here you can see the file size. It's only 900K, which is less than 1 megabyte. That's pretty small, so I'm going to keep this set at 12. If this were a really huge picture, 20 megabytes or more, you may want to adjust this quality slider down. Generally for our class, 10, 11, or 12 is going to be just fine. So click OK. Your file is now saved. You can safely close out of Photoshop.